All right, so let's continue. Stroke, a medical emergency in which blood flow to or in the brain is impaired. So, ischemic stroke, blocked blood vessel. Hemorrhagic, the vessel bursts and then there's hemorrhaging. Transient ischemic attack, okay, a temporary episode of stroke like symptoms indicating a high stroke risk. Okay, so what does that look like? So imagine blood vessels have to take blood, nutrient rich stuff to the brain. And if there's a blocked artery, now the brain cells aren't getting their nutrients and they can die. Okay. Here, if artery ruptures, same thing. Those cells are not going to get their tissues. And if the cells don't get their tissues, and if the brain tissue dies, now there are huge repercussions because the brain is what really controls the rest of the body. So when you hear about slurred speech, hear stroke, it says the classic signs. This is on page 333 in your book. It's a really nice page. Again, I love the special features in your book. So on page 333, they have helping someone in CVD emergencies. So they talk about heart attack, they talk about cardiac arrest, and they talk about stroke. So what are the symptoms? The classic signs of a stroke are face drooping, okay, arm weakness, and slurred speech. So those are the three things. So if someone's going through that, they might be going through a stroke. It says, if you suspect a stroke, call 911 immediately. The faster medical help arrives, the more likely it is that a permanent brain damage can be avoided. I had a student, he was in his 20s. He was driving, he was talking to his mom, and he was starting to get a stroke. And his mom said, pull over, you're having a stroke. Thank goodness. And she called 911. Thank goodness she recognized the signs. Okay, so let's continue. Signs, symptoms, impeding. A person may feel weak, numb, paralysis, arms, leg, or face, especially on one side, because one side of the brain controls the other side of the body. Okay, blurred vision, slurred speech, sudden severe headache, sometimes accompanied by dizziness or vomiting, confusion, or delusions. Those could all be signs. So getting help right away is very important. Over long periods of time, okay, long-term effects of a stroke, paralysis, especially on one side of the body, impaired speaking, swallowing, chewing, aphasia, a difficulty understanding words, loss of memory, pain, cold, other uncomfortable sensation. Okay, how do we help? Medication, neurologist, speech, physical therapies. So some people, okay, same with the heart. If brain tissue dies, it does not fix itself. It does not regenerate. So how is it that someone can go through a stroke and maybe lose function on one side? Because it's the brain that controls your physical movement, okay? And if the brain gets damaged, now you can't move your arm, okay? Let's say, not you, somebody, okay? So how is it that if someone has gone through a stroke and lost some of their abilities, how can they regain their abilities? Let's say regain speech, regain physical abilities. Well, the brain can relearn how to control those things, okay? They can make new pathways, rewiring to control, and that happens through therapy. So speech therapy, physical therapy. Other forms of CVD, cardiovascular disease, congenital heart disease, someone born with a congenital heart defect. The biggest congenital issues, meaning what they're born with defects, are heart defects. Heart valve disorders, hypertrophic cardiomyopathy, so heart getting too big, rheumatoid heart disease, right? So those are some of the examples. Risk factors, blood pressure, blood lipids, those LDLs, think of lethal, the bad fat, the bad cholesterol. HDLs, the good cholesterol. Blood glucose, inflammatory markers, homocysteine, weight, diet, physical activity, smoking, alcohol, drug abuse, stress, sleep, income. Age, sex, and genetics cannot be controlled, but do contribute to the risk. So these things can be controlled. Diet and exercise, smoking, alcohol can be controlled. Cardiometabolic risk, there's something called metabolic syndrome, a set of 5 unhealthy physical metabolic conditions together linked to an increased risk of type 2 diabetes, other metabolic disease, cardiometabolic risk, CMR, a cluster of 9 modifiable factors that identify individuals at risk of type 2 and cardiovascular disease. There's a picture in the book. So what are the symptoms, or what are the risks? Abdominal obesity, okay, elevated blood pressure, elevated fasting glucose, elevated blood triglycerides, low HDL, those are the healthy ones, high LDLs, the lethal ones, smoking, inflammatory markers, insulin resistance. So these are things that can be changed. It's very, very, very difficult, but someone can go through therapy. Someone can learn new habits, because a lot of things are habits. Okay, and we've talked about this in this class, many times. Okay, so how do we develop those good habits? Importance of heart health in your youth. So they talk about that. The heart is a muscle. It can be conditioned. It can be healthy, just like other muscles. All right, so that finishes cardiovascular. Okay, so we did diabetes, we did cardiovascular, now to cancer. Cancer, that horrible word. We hate it, yeah? Where did it come from? What does it mean? The word cancer means crab, okay? Like crab, because the tumor, what is cancer, okay? Cancer is uncontrolled cell growth, okay? And the problem with it is the cells can leave. They can go into the blood, and then they can set up shop somewhere else. Cancer, some books call cancer the intimate enemy, because it's the person's own cells. And it's the person's own cells that are damaging the person. Okay. Now, how are they damaging the person? Okay. If it's uncontrolled cell growth and it's a tumor, okay, it grows, it has no function, it doesn't do anything for the person, yet it takes nutrients away from the healthy tissue. And if it takes nutrients away from the healthy tissue, it's damaging the healthy tissue. Okay, so let's look. Cancer, a group of diseases marked by uncontrolled multiplication of abnormal cells. So these cells that have gotten mutations and they don't stop growing. Okay. Cancer terms, we have heard some of these things. Carcinogen, a substance known to trigger DNA mutations. Remember smoking? All those carcinogens in smoking. Oncogene. Some people, when you hear about heredity and can it be inherited, we inherit all of our genes from our parents, okay? And some of those genes can become cancerous, okay? It says a mutated gene that encourages uncontrolled cell division that results in cancer. So we have figured out what some of those genes are. And if a person has them, then they're more likely to get certain types of cancers. And if we know that, early detection is the best form of prevention. Detecting those bad cells, getting those bad cells out of the body so that they don't replicate and they don't go to other places in the body. Tumor, abnormal growth. Benign tumor. Sometimes people get benign tumors. They're not bad. You can cut them out, get them out of there. It says it grows slow, doesn't spread, is not cancerous. Malignant, that's the bad word. Malignant tumor that grows aggressively, invades surrounding tissue, can spread to other parts of the body. All cancers are malignant. So if we ever hear that word, that means we're talking about cancer. And what's bad is it can spread. If it can spread, now a person can get tumors all over the body. The word metastasis, that is the spreading. The process by which a malignant tumor spreads to other sites. And then sometimes you hear about, an aggressive cancer. What they're saying is that type of cancer spreads fast, okay? You hear about stage 1, stage 2, stage 3, stage 4. What they're talking about, where in the progression of the disease are they? The best stage to catch cancer is stage 1. Get it soon before those abnormal cells spread. So here it shows progression of cancer or carcinogen. sunlight, right, can cause skin cancer. Here are regular cells doing their thing. Here's blood, okay? It says carcinogen. It could be a chemical, it could be smoke, whatever it is. Carcinogen causes a mutation. That's a change in the DNA. Mutation in the DNA of normal cell. Now that cell is going to divide and make more, right? And the thing about cancer cells is they divide fast, making that tumor. It's a bunch of cells. Rapidly dividing genetically altered cells, the cell with mutated DNA divides repeatedly. Now, the problem is with metastasis is those cells can leave. They can go into the blood and then set up shop somewhere else. So for example, sometimes you hear about someone getting breast cancer, getting treated, blah, blah, blah. Then 2 years down the line, 3 years down the line, they have brain cancer or they have lung cancer. It could be the same cells that originated in the breast and they took off and now they're setting shop somewhere else. Okay. Cancer cells transported in blood vessel, cancer cells invade surrounding tissues, spread to other sites. And that's what makes it so dangerous because they're going to take nutrients away from the healthy tissues. And that's what eventually causes the person to die. If you've ever had the unfortunate experience of knowing someone with cancer, what happens is they get really skinny. Why? Why do they get really skinny? Because the cancer cells are taking all the nutrients away from the healthy cells and they're growing and there's tumors around the body and the person literally wastes away. So what are the risk factors? Genetic, biological. So sometimes, okay, like breast cancer can run in families. So if you know like an aunt or a grandma or mom that have cancer, breast cancer specifically, then there are inherited genes. So they have BRCA1. In the book, they show Angelina Jolie. She inherited BRCA genes. So she got a mastectomy. She also, I believe, removed her ovaries. It says, opted to have preventative double mastectomy when she learned that she carried the BRCA1 gene, which increases the risk of breast and ovarian. 2 years later, she had her ovaries removed. She's like, get them out of there, right? Lifestyle factors. If you smoke, drink, those are all toxins and they can cause mutations. Environmental exposure. Some people, they're around chemicals or they're around radiation that causes tumors. Residents in an area characterized by high pollution. Exposure to infectious agents, HPV, human papillomavirus, that can cause cervical cancers. And now it's kind of really neat. We have a vaccine, okay? Because again, people might not know it and they might be passing, it's an STD, they might be passing it around and it causes cervical cancer. HIV, of course. Hepatitis, it's a virus, okay? Can cause cancer in the liver. Helicobacter pylori, right? With the stomach. Detecting cancer. No single test can detect all cancers. So it depends on the type of cancer. There's different types of screening. Screening tests such as a mammogram, right, for the breast, colonoscopy for the colon can detect cancers. Biopsy. Biopsies, they take a sample. They're taking a tissue sample and then they're looking at it under the microscope to see if those are abnormal cells. And a person that would look at that, a histologist, histology is looking at tissues. A histologist would look and they could tell what's normal tissue, what does normal tissue look like, what do cancer cells look like. Sometimes, depending on the type of cancer, lab tests can be taken, like with prostate cancer. They can check certain levels to look. Other body fluids can detect presence of tumor markers. Imaging technologies, ultrasound, MRI, CT, PET scans. General symptoms, unexplained weight loss. So we talked about that, right? So if someone loses a lot of weight, that might be a sign of cancer. Fever, right? Because the immune system is trying to get a hold of it, trying to get rid of those abnormal cells. Fatigue, really tired, right? If those cancer cells are taking all those nutrients. Pain, it can be very painful. Cancer can be very painful, okay? Skin changes, darkness, yellowing, red skin, itching, excessive hair growth. types of cancer. Usually when you hear oma, like carcinoma, sarcoma, lymphoma,